Hello everyone, Permanence DAO call number 8. On this call, we have Max Rebol as our guest from Harbour Industrial Capital, an old investor in the ecosystem, and nowadays with the current cohort of DV, the selection of the DV cohort, he's
the front runner.
Yeah, exactly. He's been quite vocal with his views, and he's been responding to a lot of applications on the Polkadot forum. And his post, his application is currently the most viewed by far on the Polkadot forum. And there are a lot of discussions going on with a lot of people. So we'll talk about all that. But Max, before we start, would you like to give us a brief background of your history with Polkadot?
Yeah, 100%. Man, good to be here. Very distinguished crowd that I'm speaking with here. Many good friends here. Well, look, I mean, Polkadot is been part of my life for a good, 5-6 years now. It's really been a while. I mean, it's only the last 3 years that I started the fund and that, I really turned it into my full-time job. But I've been involved since the private sale. When Gavin came over to Hong Kong, he did the big Asia tour. That's kind of when I first heard about it. So back then I was a corporate slave, working at an investment bank here in Hong Kong, doing crazy hours. And then discovered Bitcoin at some point.
You are one of the OGs, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, whatever OG means, right? I'm not Satoshi, if that's what you're asking, but I've been around in the space for a while, yeah. Came out of like a, sort of more TradFi background, working at Morgan Stanley here in Hong Kong. And yeah, it was during that time that I discovered Bitcoin. Started diving down the rabbit hole, spent literally like all the time instead of in front of my work computer, reading up on Bitcoin. Was quite early in Ethereum, and then discovered about Polkadot as well, as I said, when Gavin came here, and it really resonated with me, like Gavin's vision back then. It was a good, this was around the time when we were kind of talking about like, scalability, third generation blockchains. Polkadot really resonated with me, and so I started like putting my own money in. That obviously went pretty well, and then about 3 years ago, together with Mario, we realized that there is actually quite a lot of demand for Polkadot, because there are lots of people who were like, oh wow, that actually makes a lot of sense, like, oh, real use cases, that's great. But people didn't really like know exactly like how to invest or how to best deploy their capital. And we kind of come from a finance background, both Mario and I, and then we felt like there is an opportunity to start a fund around this. And this was in 22, like end of 21, early 22. And then we started the fund, right? So registered in the Caymans. Oh yeah, that's another Mario, not this one here. Registered in the Cayman Islands VC fund, and started raising capital and started deploying it into the Polkadot ecosystem. Back then, we didn't have anything to do with Polkadot. We didn't, I met Gavin before, but just at an event. Don't think he remembers me from back then. It was just like a big event where I was in the audience, but didn't have any like personal interaction with anyone in Polkadot then. And so we started the fund, and it's always been a nothing at that point, really nothing forced us to have our hands tied to Polkadot. I mean, we could have gone to Solana, which, with the benefit of hindsight, would have been better. But just from a fundamental perspective, like Polkadot really resonated. So that's why I invested my own capital there and that of some of the people who decided to trust us, family offices, other, investors from Asia, from Europe, from the Middle East. And that's basically how Harbour Industrial Capital was born.
Perfect, thanks. So come 2022, you started deploying capital into the ecosystem, and this is around the time when parachains were being launched, right? And as far as I know, you were investing in Polkadot parachains back then. And then I think this was going on, and I remember meeting you in 2023 in Copenhagen at Decoded.
That's right.
And around that time, it was going full on. And then came the days. But back then, who were investing besides you in the ecosystem? There were you guys. I knew you, and I didn't know anyone else, to be honest. Who else was investing alongside with you?
Yeah, well, I think Arrington Capital was around. Hypersphere was around. Well, Sidetail, I'm sure we'll talk more about them later. They just had their first or maybe their second fund. Maybe it's their second fund. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, you are one of the earliest investors in the ecosystem, and you're still persisting, right?
Yeah.
And I don't remember exactly when, but then came the days of OpenGov, right? And then there was a while of OpenGov, and then there was the Giotto period beginning. So and then came DVs and the first cohort, which I was a part of. So would you like to remember those times a little bit and go into because you had a number of proposals back then, and there were some discussions around them and stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So first, like I wasn't involved in OpenGov at all, right? Like at the beginning, we just did the parachain auctions. We didn't actually talk that much at that time with with people in the ecosystem. We were just investing, and we were talking directly to some project teams, right? And like making deals directly with them, and that went well. But we didn't really talk much with people in the ecosystem. And also, to be honest, the first half year of OpenGov, I didn't really know anything about it. Yeah, or I didn't really participate very actively, or actually not at all, at the beginning. So what's your question? So then Giotto came. That's right. Yeah, I mean Giotto came, and his famous statement was, it's better if we poorly spend money now, right, and start spending, and then slowly reduce the spending and focus on the quality. I don't know. He had a funny term, I don't know. He said something like, "Oh, I'll fund every proposal out there, and then later I'll go back and decide which ones are the good ones."
Yeah, I think he was mentioning about the risk of not doing something.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Exactly.
Yes,
exactly. That was his point. He was he was obviously a big dot holder at that point already, and he just realized that we're not doing anything here. We're not nobody's talking about Polkadot, right? And for me, running a fund back then, that kind of resonated, right? Because what were the sexy narratives? Well, I mean, yes, Solana of course was already very much there, and they were doing pretty well. It was also the time when a bunch of Ethereum L2s launched, and so there was a real risk that Polkadot is kind of losing out on the narrative. And for us, as a Polkadot fund already at that time, right, of course we wanted to see more engagement with the Polkadot
chain.
And
we can agree that Giotto kind of ignited things back then, right?
For sure. He was the first one who really also sparked my interest. Up until the time that Giotto came, I personally didn't really I kind of ignored OpenGov, to be honest. It wasn't really on my radar, right? I looked at the parachains, and I was very deep into what the parachains were doing. I just thought of Polkadot more as the layer 0 that kind of secures them. but I wasn't like that active in OpenGov. I was more on the parachain level and speaking to parachain teams.
Got it. So around that time, this huge OpenGov movement and all the discussions around it started happening, and then EV, like Giotto, kind of loses the plot a little bit, like goes out of control, and then Web3 Foundation sort of like intervenes.
Yeah.
Exactly, but and then the TV thing starts, and then around that time, I think you start thinking about like launching a was it $10 million or was $100 million? Sorry, a Polkadot ecosystem fund, right? So your Harbour Industrial Capital's next Polkadot fund, right?
Yeah. Well, no, there's a bit in between here. So at that point, we were still like raising our first fund, right? We hadn't launched our second fund. We have launched a second fund now. Keep in mind, like first fund, right? Currently, it's around $25 million, but that's AUM, right? That's not what we raised, but that's like the capital appreciation in the fund. So that's what we're kind of sitting on now as of the beginning of this year.
And that's been growing as well, right? Over the years.
That's of course been growing. Yeah. I mean, I can talk a bit more about the fund performance if you like. Because I think it's worth that people notice a little bit, right?
Yes, please. Yeah, briefly we can. It'd be good to know about it. Yeah.
So I mean, we started deploying in 22, right? January 22 or February 22, started deploying. And if you remember, right, if you go back, that's when DOT was around $20. So I think that was when we bought the first DOT for our fund. And then over time, it essentially just went down, right? And now we're at $5. So that's kind of, the time horizon in which I've been operating the fund. So obviously not a very good time, not a very good vintage, right? With the benefit of hindsight. But,
right.
During that time and being like a fully fledged Polkadot fund, we, on a dollar basis, right, returned around 3x, right? That's mark to market, right? Because we haven't paid out yet, but that's like kind of using the market price of the tokens or the latest round of valuations in terms of the tokens that we hold.
So you managed to do this despite the depreciation of DOT, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, great. And then, I'm going to come back to your proposals and what happened with. I think you had 3 or 4 on Polkadot, and then 1 on Kusama, was it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they were all pretty similar, so I mean, we can just talk about them in one go. But there were differences between each other in response to community feedback. But I can go into the details if you're interested in it. But look, what was our thinking here, right? I was running a VC fund at that point already, and it wasn't like a huge fund by comparison to many of the other funds out there, right? Again, especially compared to the other ecosystems. I happen to be quite close with the guys who run the Cardano ecosystem fund, for example, right? I also know the guys from the Avalanche ecosystem fund, right? Like we're talking of orders of magnitude bigger, right? Like $100-200 million, something like that, right? And something like that didn't exist in Polkadot, right? And so I thought, all the builders, right? And we have some builders here on this call here as well. They're obviously, they go to Polkadot because it's amazing technology. But if they don't find like the funding resources there, then they're gonna move somewhere else. And it is an unfortunate situation that still persists today, and that was very much the case, 2 or 3 years ago. That funding opportunities for Polkadot-based projects are very limited, right? And we can throw it up here to the floor to see whether people agree, but that was just the case. It still is the case, right? I mean, if you're a founder and want to raise money, you're not going to Polkadot, right? You're going to Ton or even Tron or Solana or Avalanche, right? Like that's where you go to raise money, not to Polkadot, and that's an issue, and that's what we wanted to change. So Mario, you raised your hand.
Yeah, the question is indeed, there are some people here in the ecosystem that want to avoid that topic, that don't want to touch the fact that investors are leaving, or they don't have the, or there is just no money to invest in startups here in general in Polkadot. So of course, people with bright ideas, they go somewhere where they are supported, but where there is also a small amount of money. Imagine 10K, 20K, 30K, 50K, whatever, to start with. Do you, because you are a long-term investor, you see the same things that I see? How can we change that? How can we change that narrative? How can we prove to people that there is not, well, everyone is saying go to OpenGov, right?
Yeah,
but
it's a bit of a chicken and egg problem, right? I think, what we have to get to this like escape velocity, where people come and build on Polkadot because there are many other great projects building on Polkadot as well. Currently, we're not there yet, right? We're like, our ecosystem is like far behind, let's just face the truth, Solana, right? In terms of what kind of projects are there, and how attractive the project, how attractive it is for projects to get into this ecosystem, right? That's the unfortunate reality. Now, going back to your question, how do we change that, right? I mean, I do think it has to start very much with making more funding available to Polkadot-based startups, right? And they have to get pushed, they have to get supported, right? And Mario, you made a good point. At the moment, everyone goes to the treasury, right? Because the one thing that is working pretty well, right, is getting grants out of the treasury. And so as a result, you have a situation where, like in a nanny state, right, projects are constantly going back to the treasury and asking for funding. Like, oh, I did this milestone, give me money. Oh, I did that milestone, give me money. That works for bootstrapping, for like early stage, right? But it doesn't work very well for like the growth stage, right? Because that's where VC capital can do a much more effective job. It's also like an inefficient way of using treasury money, in my opinion, to, go and give this money to founders as a grant, because many of the founders would actually be very happy to give up equity in return to the cash that they receive. But unfortunately, the treasury is not able to do this at the moment, right? The way the treasury is set up is they can only hand out grants, right? And then, maybe after some milestones, to a second grant, a third grant. But two things, like A, the treasury itself isn't really getting anything in return here, which a VC fund would, right? Like a VC fund kind of by definition has to be commercially operated. And also, right, you kind of have a bit of a lack of accountability with grants. You get one grant after the other, right? But, next milestone, like it's the same people voting again. And yeah, I mean, you don't get like the healthy pressure that the market gives you in terms of accountability if you don't have access to VC capital. And it is unfortunately still true that Polkadot lacks VC capital. The big VCs, I can tell you that, are still ignoring Polkadot. That's a fact. Like they're not looking at it. They're like, yeah, no, we're not interested. There's no hype there. There's no liquidity, right?
Yeah.
As like a small to medium VC fund, like, we know that there are opportunities there. We know that there are some real gems, that there are some amazing projects that are totally undervalued within Polkadot that have like a lot of potential, right? If they properly leverage Polkadot technology. But then again, we're only like a small to medium size VC fund. I mean, we're arguably more a small VC fund compared to the really big players. So we want to scale it, right? And I think, I think Polkadot needs that, but it's not easy, right? It's not easy to completely change the narrative from one day to another. But this is what we're working on.
Max, do you think we speak the same language? And that we, I mean, not the two of us, but when I came in, I spoke all the time about what is the value? What is it that we get in return? What is the ROI, etc.? But we are talking here with a very techie club, and they want to see code, etc. Do you think we are aligned? So we do understand that a VC fund is needed because those startups, they need to have some oxygen. Otherwise, they go somewhere else or they die or whatever. But do you think we, the urge in the community is high enough to see this, that we, it could be that we don't speak the same language?
Yeah, well, I don't know exactly what you mean here, speak the same language. I mean, everyone wants to see a successful project, right? And I think my concern is more that of, successful founders or prominent founders moving away, because they don't find the funding resources here that they need. I mean, there are many, I'm not going to name any names, but we all know who we're talking about, right? Prominent, projects moving elsewhere. And obviously that doesn't look good on us, right? And, we're trying to change it. You know what I think, if Polkadot and Harbour Industrial Capital is really 100% focused on the Polkadot ecosystem. So, we're not going anywhere, right? We're not going anywhere. The only question is going to be whether we're going to be small or big, right? If we're small, yes, we can still support a few projects and we can make some good money, right? Because, we tend to pick like the winners. That's kind of our job as a VC fund. And then create a great ROI for our investors. I mean, I give you one example, Peak Network, right? Peak Network is one of our, where we came in very early. It's a Polkadot parachain. It's one of our early portfolio companies. They're not really affiliating themselves very much with Polkadot at the moment. They're not really using the Polkadot logo in their marketing materials, but they're still a Polkadot-based project, right? I think it's something that we should talk about more, right? To celebrate these kind of success stories, because Peak, they're clearly solving a big problem. They have an amazing product market fit. They have a great team, right? Where they're going out, they're onboarding real world clients, and they are employing the Polkadot technology in a very, very smart way. So we supported them, and for us, it was a great ROI, right? So we want to see more of these kind of projects like them. Whether they brand themselves as Polkadot or not, I think that doesn't even matter that much to me, especially as we're moving into the jam era. It doesn't really matter so much if you brand yourself as a Polkadot project or not, as long as you use core time, right? Or you build within the jam stack. That's amazing. That's within our product market fit, right? That's within our scope. And you are still creating meaningful, valuable transactions to use up block space, so to speak, to fill it with some useful transactions. Happy days, right? You're taking advantage of this amazing machine that Polkadot is, that Jam will be. And whether or not you brand yourself as a Polkadot project is, in my opinion, secondary.
I agree. Now, I think, Max, would you like to talk about the proposals a little bit? Because
sure.
I'm going to move into the DV thing and what's happening today and that area.
Yeah. Right, the proposal. Great. Thank you for giving.
Yeah, of course.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so it was, I think, last year around this time you started interacting with the Treasury, right? For the for your fund, but I think for the family offices affiliation sort of thing, right?
That's right.
Would you like to give us a bit background on that and what happened there and miscommunications, learnings, maybe how it could be improved? And
yeah, no, look, thank you for giving me this opportunity to clarify that, because the one thing that is just so hilarious, right, is that some people, in Polkadot, they only know us because of these proposals, right? That's the only thing they know about us. And they don't know like the history that, everything that I shared just before here. And they think, that's the only thing that we care about. In reality, the first thing I want to say about this is, from our perspective, this whole, like these family office summit proposals, they were a pretty minor thing, right? They weren't by no means like the most important thing that we did, right? The parachain auctions were much more important to us at that point. Raising the capital from other existing like investors here in Hong Kong or elsewhere was much more important than that. But what was this really about, right? So I talked about the need for a larger, bigger VC fund for Polkadot. Now, how do you get there, right? How do you raise money for Polkadot? Because we really thought the Polkadot ecosystem is starved for capital. What can you do to get more capital into the ecosystem? And so I basically thought, what do literally like all the other VC funds out there do is they go out and raise capital oftentimes at these LP conferences or family office conferences. And these are like conferences that have been, existing for, many years or many decades or whatever, where fund managers go and promote their fund, right? It really as simple as that. So you have people with a real estate fund going there and going like, oh yeah, you should invest in real estate in New York. Great idea, right? And then somebody else comes and says like, oh yeah, and we're you should invest in renewable energy in Thailand, and these are all the great ways how to do that. And great, right? And then somebody runs an AI tech fund or something like that, right? And so my idea was that we as Polkadot should also go to these types of conferences in order to promote Polkadot amongst wealthy investors or like active investors, right? And family offices. So that was really my idea, right? I don't think it's a particularly controversial idea either. I think it was very much needed at that point. And we as Polkadot, we went to a lot of other conferences, right? Like whatever ETHCC or like sort of these like crypto conferences or consensus and Token 49. So like these things that are very much within the crypto bubble, right? So we did attend a lot of these conferences, which is good. So I'm not saying anything bad about this. I think it's good that we as Polkadot are there in this space. But then again, you're still like inside the echo chamber, right? And my thought was, well, there are just like there's just so much bigger world out there of investors, right? Professional investors, I'm talking about, like, other funds, other family offices, institutional capitals, endowments to a certain degree, even sovereign wealth funds, right? That are exploring the space. But how do you get yourself as Polkadot in front of these people, right? And yes, there are many ways to do it, but one of the more obvious ones are these conferences. And the truth, unfortunately, is that these conferences are quite, how shall I say, prestigious, let's say, or they have quite a high barrier to entry. That is on purpose, right? So that not anyone can go and pitch. And there is like a participation fee, right? And these events can be, fairly expensive. But then again, it gives you access to like a large network of investors. And so that was the idea, right?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
this is to attract more traditional money into the ecosystem.
Exactly.
Right? We can call it old money, maybe.
Yeah.
Not in
exactly,
negative sense, but yeah, like the family businesses, like they've been running for I don't know, like 100 years, 70 years, and I don't know, they made money from steel, and now the new generation is looking into expanding their investments into new technologies and stuff like that. And your idea was to kind of bring in that money, all in line with your idea of how resource-starved Polkadot community is, right? In terms of capital. Okay,
spot on. That's it. That was the idea, right? And then, us as a startup fund, right, we didn't have the money to, pay $100,000 for like a series of events. Like we didn't have it. Like that's just simply the truth, right? We're a small fund. We don't have a marketing budget of $100,000. And because of course we have like money in our fund, keep in mind that money isn't our money. It's like our LP's money, our investors' money, right? So we cannot just go like, oh yeah, we just feel like it, and we spend our investor money on marketing, right? That would be like a breach of fiduciary duty. So we cannot do that. So we couldn't just go there on our own, like, and pay these sponsorship fees to speak at these conferences. And that's when we thought like, oh yeah, maybe it's a good idea if Polkadot sponsors these conferences. I mean, Polkadot is sponsoring other conferences that are much more expensive, as I said, like, some crypto conferences and so on and so on. And our idea there was to go and sponsor on behalf of Polkadot, and then get like a bunch of speakers, including ourselves, but also other people who are good speakers, obviously, because you have to be able to talk about Polkadot in a meaningful way, right? In an engaging way, right? To get people excited about it, and get them there to represent Polkadot, and then to raise money for Polkadot. That was really the whole idea, right? And just to jump ahead a little bit in the timeline, we got a lot of support for it, right? A lot of people, when we submitted this, were like, "Oh, this is a great idea. This is exactly what we need." But in the end, it was, I forgot the number, but it was something like 49 to 51% on the nay side, right? So it was very, very close. Because there were a few like anonymous wallets coming in and saying no, and we were like, okay, so that didn't work. And so we revised the proposal based on some feedback and submitted it again. And then funnily enough, it was again like really close. I think 48 to 52 or something like that, but again on the nay side. And it's unfortunate because at the beginning it was, more positive. And it was more like, people were like, yeah, that's a great idea, because of course, like everybody in their right sense would kind of have to agree that Polkadot needs more capital for builders, right? I mean, it's kind of a non-issue in my opinion. But OpenGov doesn't always work exactly that way. There's lots of politics. There are lots of other people who wanted us to fail with this, and who whipped up the mood against us and like voted it down, and so it failed again, right? That's kind of the status quo, right? We tried once again with another modification, right? We reduced the size. People were, oh, it's too big, so we reduced it. We reduced it like big time, like a fifth of the original proposal. And went to like a different kind of like a much smaller size of a conference series, and again it was very close that it would have like won, but then in the end it didn't. So that's basically the status quo. Now my takeaway from this whole thing is, okay, fine, then we're just not going to do it, right? It's not that we are desperate to do like a conference series to pitch to wealth investors about Polkadot. We could have done it. I still maintain that it would have been a good idea to do it, but if the community doesn't want it, then we're just simply not going to do it.
Got it. Thanks. So I was on DV for the first cohort, and when I saw your proposal, and we had a talk, private chat about it as well, and I was thinking, like, this is a great way to attract capital into the ecosystem. But I thought, like, if this investment is going to be made into these the startups or these businesses, then the treasury somehow, for it to be sustainable, have some equity in these investments, right? And then you introduced that into your proposal as well, if I remember correctly. Was it the second one or the third one? It wasn't the second one already, right?
Yeah, I think it was the third one. It was the idea that the fund repays a share of its future profits to the treasury, right, for this marketing support. So I kind of thought, like, people are gonna jump on it, right? Because I think it's a very, very nice, a very genuine and very good offer from the perspective of the token holders. And once again, I mean, I have to say this again and again, the voting was very, very close. It was very close. Actually, it was, for a long time, we were like in the lead, but then in the end, like, again, some anonymous accounts voted it down, right? After receiving a lot of positive community support. I obviously have some ideas like who are behind these accounts, but I don't want to go into the speculation here. The truth is, like, some people, some powerful people somewhere in the background, in the shadow, they didn't like it, right? And there are all kind of reasons why maybe they didn't like it, right? I mean, the most obvious reason that I can think of is that they saw it as competition, right? That they wanted to do something else, that they had like a different vision for, how to raise capital for Polkadot. But of course, there's always like a competitive element here. My perspective is that competition is good, right? I'm for capitalism, right? I think it's good if you have multiple different parties competing for the same scarce resource. That's a good thing, right? That's what fosters innovations. That's what leads people to excellence. If there's no competition, right, you have like a state monopoly, it's usually not a great idea. So competition is a very good word for me. But obviously there were like some people who clearly didn't like it and used some shadow wallets to vote us down.
Got it. Thanks. So before we move into like what's happening today around the new DV cohort, just one question: are you planning to pursue this further? This idea with OpenGov, Polkadot, or Kusama?
Possible, yeah, possible. But it would have to be like a significantly amended proposal, right? There are ways to do it. I mean, possible. You know what? I'm not sure yet. I mean, the one thing I should say about it is it's also been not a particularly fun experience, right? Like getting all these kind of shitty comments from people who go like, oh, you're just trying to steal money from the treasury, blah, 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 right? Like if you're on the receiving end of that, you go like, I mean, why am I doing this to myself, right? So that's why I say possibly, but probably also not, right? I guess like the only reason when I would want to do it is if something, significant changes in OpenGov, and we can talk a little bit more about what that could mean. But currently, there are many things I find quite frustrating about the way OpenGov operates. We can go into that if you like, but
I think it's
there are good and bad things about it.
Yeah, now time for it. And I'll just like to give a bit of context what's happening nowadays. And the applications for Decentralized versus Cohort 4 has been open for a couple of days now. And and we have quite a lot of applications on Polkadot forum, and your application there is there as well. And your application has currently around 320 views, and it's the most viewed application.
That's amazing.
For Polkadot Forum right now, and
front runner
yeah.
in terms of views.
Yeah, exactly. And there are a lot of discussions under your post. Anyone interested, they can go on to Polkadot Forum and check it out. I think it's mainly around you. I see actors from Chaos DAO and Kus DAO, and there have been some discussions between you guys over the last, I don't know, 5-6 months. Can we say, maybe like on and off? Now it's not like ongoing, but as a member of the community, I can as I witnessed like some quarrels now and then, some discussions, some arguments and stuff like that.
Some friendly exchanges of opinions.
Friendly exchanges,
not some arguments.
Yeah, sorry. But that aside, your post being like viewed this much and getting this much interaction, you are very vocal about this cohort, and you have responded to almost all applications, and you support some, you criticize some, and you criticize and support some. So I've been looking at this and thinking, I think Max must be thinking this is a very, very critical cohort because you're the most active person around this at the moment in the community.
I mean, if anything, I just don't understand why other people are not more active.
Yeah, would you like to give us a bit of background on this, and what are your thoughts? Do you see the situation alarming, or the risks you see with it? You have been quite vocal about it on like a number of different posts, but it would be great to hear from you.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Let's start with the elephant in the room, and that's Chaos DAO. I decided deliberately to include a section in my application titled "The Chaos DAO Problem." Now, I'm well aware that I'm making myself a few enemies here from the Chaos DAO community, which is okay, right? Which is something I can live with. I think many more people would speak up against Chaos DAO if it wasn't that they had to fear retaliation or being worried about completely putting themselves out there. I'm not too worried about that, and I'll speak up against things that I think are going wrong in this ecosystem. Now, Chaos DAO is an interesting entity, right? Like most things, they started off with good intentions. I have no doubt about that, right? They are, and obviously I know many of the people here in person. They are obviously early adopters of Polkadot. They are early advocates of OpenGov, or of governance first and then of OpenGov. They're very much trying to get people engaged. Well, kind of. At least for a while, they tried to do that and get them involved into governance. These are all very positive things. So, I'm, not saying that they started off with bad intentions. But then they kind of transformed into something rather different. And I think for them, this, by the way, has nothing to do with me, but everything to do with Giotto. During the prime time of Giotto, Chaos DAO were kind of the main opposition to Giotto's, somewhat crazy spending proposals, right? What was it, like $30 million on marketing or something in total, right? If I remember that. So,
Right.
Obviously there was a lot of, really questionable ideas from Giotto, right? I don't know, I can't speak for Giotto, obviously, but these are things that he did, and some of them were really rather outrageous proposals. Chaos DAO clearly pushed back, right? So I guess that's where they sharpened their teeth, and that's when they kind of developed this neighing culture, right? Where they go in and go like, oh, this is a grift, right? We have to call this out. We have to stop this. This is a grift. And this is bad. And this is, and no. And, I think during that time, so I'm talking about like mid last year, this was arguably like a helpful, philosophy kind of to go by, to just call everything a grift and, just vote everything nay. And, but now Giotto is gone, so we don't really have any voice that is pro, a more liberal spending here, more liberal fiscal policies. And if anything, like the biggest problem that we have now is, we don't have enough builders, or that we don't have enough projects coming in. And Chaos DAO is very much someone who's like nailing everything, as soon as they can. And they also kind of take pride in it, right? And this is something that bothers me a little bit, and that I think is unhealthy, right? You have, Limo posting on Twitter saying things like, the first thing I do when I wake up in the morning is nay your proposal, right? I mean, it's kind of funny, right? Like, it's not that I'm immune to meme culture, and it is funny, right? Like, when I see these things, I also find them kind of funny. I have to laugh about it. It's kind of, haha, right? But it's not what like an open and welcoming ecosystem should do, right?
Got it.
And yeah, well, yeah. Let me just leave it there for now.
Okay, good. Yeah, I agree. It's got that. I think Chaos have this really creative culture and sense of humor. But at the same time, I understand your perspective that I think you'd be expecting a somewhat more professional kind of tone, I guess.
Yeah.
Right. But
at the risk of sounding boring, but yeah, it would be nice to be a bit more professional.
Yeah, got it. But I think like if there was a balanced culture that has this, but at the same time enough emphasis on professionalism as well, that if we had like a balance of these different sides or different cultures, I think this would have been less bothersome to you, right? So what I see in your reaction is I think you are sensing some kind of imbalance here, and you're speaking against that, right?
Yeah,
and you've
that's
been
true.
really,
And I
really,
think,
really active with like responding to proposals and
yeah,
stuff. So,
I think
what
we
would you
should
like to-
think about this.
what kind of change?
Yeah, no,
Sorry, what kind of change? I'm curious. What kind of change would you like to see in the ecosystem regarding DV and culture-wise? Because you are trying to say something here with your reaction, right? You're not trying to stop businesses, to shut down people, cancel people, or anything like that. You're just saying like, I want a certain kind of change, and I think this would be better, and that's what you're trying to say. And I'm curious to know, what are the outlines of that view?
Yeah. So first of all, I would say that we should think of these different DVs kind of like political parties in a democracy, right? It is kind of what they are, right? And if you think of traditional traditional parties, right? I don't know, let's say the conservatives and like the liberals and like the social democrats or something like that, right? In pick your country, right? It's not that necessarily one party is totally good and one is totally bad, right? They all kind of have something to them, and there is like a case that you can make for either of them. But in a democracy, what you often like observe, and the United States is the best example at the moment, right? If you have like too much of one thing for a long time, the pendulum tends to swing like into the other direction, and that's a good thing. That's a positive thing, right? And in OpenGov of Polkadot, I think the main fault lines currently run between the fiscally conservative and the fiscally liberal, right? I think that's the main disagreement, right? Should we spend more or should we spend less? Should we spend all the money in the treasury in order to get more growth into Polkadot? Or should we save all the money in the treasury till the end of days because maybe an even rainier day than today comes in the future, right? So I think this is the real difference that we're talking about here. And yes, under Giotto, it was quite liberal spending. And I certainly think that a lot of the marketing spent under him was a bit silly, to be honest. But now the pendulum has already swung into the other direction, right? Like just look at the like Alice and Bob, right? They come up with this treasury report, right? And it's the latest one, just came out. And if you look at the first page of it, right, like the money spent from the treasury goes up till about early or early last year, and then it suddenly drops, right? It's really like a significant drop, right? And a large reason for that is because of the recent dominance of Chaos DAO that are voting down every proposal that comes from an outsider, right? Chaos DAO is very much kind of an insider club, right? It's a bunch of people who, do their thing and they know each other and da. But if something new comes up, right? And I see this all the time. Someone comes up with a new innovative proposal, puts it to OpenGov, and they immediately go like, who are you? Why should, we're voting nay? We don't know you, so we vote nay, right? This is the default reaction of Chaos DAO. And I talked about politics and I talked about the pendulum. And yes, this was justified for some period of time, but I think now we're at a different stage in Polkadot's fiscal development, where we should once again do more counter-cyclical spending on growth. I think there's a genuine risk that if we don't deploy the money that is clearly there in the treasury on grants for good projects, then we're running risk of becoming completely obsolete.
Got it. Okay, we're around 1 hour now, so I'll just ask a couple of short questions, Max, and I think we can wrap it up. You're tired already. I can see it. So yeah, we made you talk a lot, but
that's okay. Okay, I can talk about OpenGov forever. We can do another 2 hours.
Yeah,
I have no problem.
Yeah, that's for a separate interview, maybe.
So I would like to ask, what are the immediate changes in DV would you like to see? Because I think DV
term limits.
Hugely,
term limits I would like to see.
Term limits, because DV is hugely influential right now, right? With fiscal policy and even the what's being talked about in Polkadot and stuff like that. It's very defining. So what are, say, if you could change 3 things about DV, what could that be? One is term limits, right? Yeah.
I tell you why term limits are important, right? So actually, I don't know if you know that, but my background, what I studied in uni, is political science and specifically development management at the LSE. And so we studied a lot about how developing countries, essentially why Africa is poor and Asia has been rising, and the difference between the development stages of different countries around the world. And Africa and many other developing countries, one of the big problems they have is that they have one successful guy, a successful reformer. A great example in the African context would be Robert Mugabe, right, of Zimbabwe, who was clearly a liberation fighter who won a lot of rights for the population, the black population at that time, because obviously there were a lot of issues, post-colonialism and whatnot. So he clearly started off as a great guy. The problem with Robert Mugabe was that he got addicted to power, right? And he didn't want to leave. And then he tried everything in his arsenal to remain in power until he drove Zimbabwe against the wall, right? And this pattern is repeating over and over and over again. If you have some, powerful kind of politician or something, right, who maybe has in the first place been elected democratically, but then he goes and, oh, I'm such a great father for the country. I'm gonna change the constitution to remove term limits and to keep myself in power indefinitely. That's usually when shit starts hitting the fan, right? And then these people, they stay in power forever, right? And that's why, the US Constitution, for example, is so clear about 2 term limits, right? You can be the most brilliant president in the history of the United States. You're still not gonna do 3 term limits. That's just not happening. It is a very, very essential part of a democracy to have a change. And there's the old saying of power corrupts, but absolute power corrupts absolutely. And if you just remain in power for a long time, you run several terms, you feel a certain entitlement to power. You think that the country cannot do without you, right? Then, that is when things start to go awry. And, if you haven't read between the lines, I'm referring to Chaos DAO here, right? They have been very prominent in Polkadot governance. They kind of think that they are the only stewards that can protect the interest of Polkadot. They feel entitled to their power. I'm sure about that. And again, I'm sure it started from good intentions. But, if there's anything we should learn from this kind of little history lesson, is that we need term limits. And that is certainly the case for DV.
Got it. So I think that's the first and foremost change you'd like to see with DV. That is term limits, 2 term limits, like you said. And I think you think that now is time for a change, right? And see new views, new faces.
Absolutely.
Yeah, new perspectives and new ideas and new policies, I guess.
And there are lots of people who are trying to, come in and pick that up, right? I mean, I'm based in Hong Kong, so I know the Asian communities quite well, right? We have great communities in Southeast Asia. We have communities in mainland China. I mean, mainland China is a huge market, massively overlooked by Polkadot. Very, very unfortunate. Some of the smartest, brightest developers are in mainland China. So, having some DVs from there who can kind of represent their interests is kind of an absolute no-brainer, in my opinion. So, I mean, there are people who are stepping up, right? But, again, the Chaos DAO mindset would be, but who are you, right? Like, what have you done, right? You haven't been around for such a long time, so why should we give any power to you, right? I get it, that's how they think. But if you take a step back and you look at the entire ecosystem, then that's what Polkadot should do. They should give more power to people who have a fresh pair of eyes and who are not too deep down in the trenches of OpenGov.
Got it. Thanks a lot. I think we can slowly wrap it up. I'd like to ask, do you find the current applicants interesting? Do you see good hope in new applications for DV? And do you see this, if there's a change, do you see this going into a good place?
Yeah, I mean, yes, there are obviously some new applicants coming. I mean, not as many as I would have hoped, right? I just read through all the applications today, but not as many as I would have hoped. But obviously, there's still more than 6, obviously, which is the number of DVs that the Web3 Foundation wants to select. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I cannot speak for them, obviously. I don't know them in so much detail. I mean, some of them are returning applicants as well, which, again, I think is fine. But, I guess, I'm pleading for, giving relatively new people fresh pair of eyes a shot here, right? I mean, I think that's a generally positive thing. The one thing, there's another thing I want to add, because you talk a lot about DV. I mean, I'm probably also not the biggest defender of the DV program as a whole either, right? So I kind of feel that the DV program was a good fix, a temporary fix in the Giotto era, because I understand the logic of the Web3 Foundation, and they were like, oh, there's one whale, and da-da-da. And I think I'm not really spilling any secrets here when I say that this was in a way launched in response to Giotto. So it kind of made sense at that point. But long term, these like 6 million DOT per DV are also a suboptimal solution, I would say. And I'll tell you why. If you get delegated this voting power, you lack skin in the game, right? The people who are becoming DV now, yes, they get like power for a short period of time. That's great. They can shape it, but they're not necessarily, well, they're most likely not dot holders, like, I mean, definitely not of 6 million DOT, right? So, the way, if you're like delegated responsibility compared to having earned that responsibility, and with earned, I essentially mean bought, right? Like you acquire DOT and then you hold them and then you vote with them. That's a very different logic, right? I mean, it's quite a philosophical difference, I guess, or like not philosophy, but like sort of a political science kind of question here. But there are definitely some inherent flaws with this logic, right? I mean, it is of course a little bit like sort of a government administrator, like a bureaucrat who's deciding over like certain handouts by the government, right? That's what it feels like a little bit, right? It's not a company, for example, whatever, Apple, Google, like someone who's like who made their money and then they invest in a startup, for example, or like a VC fund that is accountable to their LPs, right? And then they invest or they give money to somebody, right? Like a DV, similar to, a government, let's call it like a government administrator over like a certain budget, right? The incentives that they follow are very different to the ones that a capital owner would follow. So, there can be good things and there can be bad things. So I don't mean it, I don't want to like discount it entirely, but it's a suboptimal solution. It's a solution, but it's a suboptimal one. And if anything, and I'm going to wrap here, like if anything, I think, these kind of DVs that we have now, and we'll have this cohort, we have another one again. In the long term, we should still get back to voting based on actual holdings and on earned delegations, right? Earned delegations, again, is a different story, right? If I just like pitch to all the DOT holders out there, oh, I've got this great idea, I'm voting this way, that way, delegate to me, that's an entirely different story, right? But the Web3 Foundation making these delegations is not ideal. And the other thing is, it also somewhat disencourages voters with smaller stacks. I kind of feel that as well. Like, even if you're like a fairly wealthy, not a whale, but like a dolphin, let's say, I don't know if that's the correct term, but let's say you hold, 1 million DOT, okay? 1 million DOT, and you bought those DOT yourself. That's quite a bit of money, right? That's $5 million. So that's clearly like a nice bag. But with 1 million DOT, is it really worth to go into OpenGov and really try to vote there actively? Probably not, right? Because the DVs with 6 million each, outvote you by 6 times. It feels a little bit disproportional.
Got it. So I think you're saying that it kind of, in an unexpected and undesired way, disincentivizes right participation in OpenGov, even if you were a dolphin or maybe like closer to a whale. Okay, so I think you're seeing a path to even like maybe termination of the program in the medium to long term, and maybe when we have way more participation from the token holders, right? Not just like 0.1%, but when we get to like 30-40%, this program is probably going to have completed its mission, right? So maybe we're trying to get to that level. So I'll have to leave in about 5-10 minutes too. I'll just briefly ask you about your DV application and how would you do it in very briefly, and then your plans with HIC and what's going to happen in the coming years, months, and yeah, your plans with Polkadot. Very brief. Let's start with your DV application and what's your stack and what you promised, very briefly.
Yeah, DV application. I mean, I think I already said most of the things that are worth saying here, which is that I believe we need to be fiscally more liberal, i.e., spend more on projects that are new, that are interesting, that are promising, right? That have some, that can bring new, exciting applications to Polkadot. Give people a shot, right? Yeah, of course, not everyone is going to be a home run. But I guess if I get this DV, you can expect, more ayes than nays. Of course, I'm going to nay, crappy proposals as well, right? It's not, there's lots of crappy, shitty proposals out there as well. It's sometimes hard to say exactly where to draw the line, but on balance, I think I made it quite clear that I would want to be fiscally more liberal.
Got it. And with HIC, what are your plans?
Yeah, with HIC. Well, with HIC is a very different story.
Exactly. Yeah.
So HIC is obviously my main focus still, right? So we're currently raising the second fund, right? We're targeting to raise $100 million. That's an ambitious target, but I don't think it's impossible because we've got the performance of the first fund, and so I am actually I'm spending most of my time talking to prospective investors, right, and large institutional investors. There is a lot of interest, right? You just have to know how to pitch it. You have to speak their language, right? Mario was asking a question about language before, right? I mean, a lot of Polkadot native people, they have quite a hard time explaining Polkadot to a more a more sort of kind of, let's call it traditional old money kind of audience, right? Because then they go into whatever scaling mechanisms or transactions per seconds or different consensus algorithms, and obviously people don't really care about that. But what they do care about is what can you do with it, right? What are the cool applications that this enables that you couldn't do without, right? And this is something where we're actually having some pretty good conversations. There is some clear interest, right? If you package it correctly. As I said, this investor conference series is probably not going to happen now, so that's why it's taking me a bit more time to find the right people to talk to and to raise this money. But we're doing it nonetheless. Mario, my co-founder, he's currently on a little roadshow through Asia, Philippines, Thailand, Singapore. Meeting with some investors there. So, it is still very much our plan to raise this fund for Polkadot. We're gonna do it in any case. And at the same time, we're also already starting to invest, right? So I haven't actually talked much about, our investments yet. And I also probably shouldn't mention any names right here on this show because some of them are still under wraps. But, we should be able to announce them fairly soon. Suffice to say, we are already in very active, very advanced talks with multiple projects that are building on Polkadot to invest in their seed round, pre-seed, seed round. One that is also a little bit more later stage. And these are good projects that we fundamentally believe in, right? These are projects that take good advantage of the core technology stack that Polkadot provides in order to solve some real world use cases. And, you know, for several of them, we're like the largest, like the single largest investor, right? They told me like, oh, I talked to so many other investors, you know, nobody is able to provide me with the funding, because we're building on Polkadot, right? I literally spoke to one guy. I mean, I just tell this like an anecdote. He literally told me that he was like, "Oh, I'm building this thing on Polkadot. I don't have any investors yet, but one VC said they're going to invest if I move the project to Solana." Right? Like that's a real conversation that I've had recently, and I was like, "Okay, do you want to go to Solana?" And he was like, "No, the Solana tech is shit. Right? Why would I want to go there?" Right?
Cool.
But
yeah.
that's the realities, right? And so, you know, if it's a brilliant project, if it's a good founder, then of course we're going to invest and we're going to do more of that. So yeah, that's my plan with HIC.
Perfect. So the builders, can they reach out to you for investment opportunities, maybe? Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Your
Of course,
side,
100%.
on Telegram, on Twitter and other channels, right?
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, no, please. I mean, reach out. You know, I know many people in the Polkadot ecosystem already. I mean, I'm going to most of the, you know, the conferences. I'm always there. So yeah, obviously, like, come talk to me. I mean, we have the second fund now. It's not as big as we wanted it to be. So that's why we have to keep on raising, because that's the reality of running a VC fund. You're always looking in two directions: raising capital and deploying capital, right? These things go hand in hand. Yeah. But yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, good projects, please, by any means, always do reach out to me. Always happy to chat.
Okay, perfect, man. I think we can wrap it up now. So yeah, I'd like to hear like 3 things you love about Polkadot in single words or very short.
3 things that I love about Polkadot. Okay. I love Gavin. I mean, it sounds maybe a bit lame, but I mean, I'm still very much inspired by him. As a matter of fact, I was at the Jam Tour twice now, like here in Hong Kong 2 or 3 weeks ago, which we actually co-organized. And then yesterday I was in Shenzhen where Gavin spoke. And, you know, I listened to him so many times, but like every time when he talks about, you know, his vision for Polkadot, it really resonates with me. So, you know, I like him as a person and as a leader. Number 2, I do like OpenGov, right? As stupid as it sounds, because, you know, I'm definitely someone who's like picking fights here and who's, you know, not shying away from, you know, making my opinion known. So I do like OpenGov, right? It's, you know, I mean, it's you know, democracies are messy, right? And that's kind of what Polkadot ultimately is, and OpenGov, right? It is a democracy, not in the sense of one person, one vote, but one vote, which is, you know, still kind of like a democracy with a twist. But these things are messy by definition, and that's how they are, and that's where we are. And, you know, I think it's better than, you know, a system that is led with like a strong hand into the wrong direction.
Okay. Number 3, does it exist?
And number 3, yes, I have one more, and I think that's a good one. It's the low valuations of projects. So I'm saying this with the perspective of a VC fund, right?
So the opportunity.
There is a lot of opportunity in Polkadot. Yeah, the low valuations. You have some excellent projects with maybe a $5 million market cap, $10 million market cap. Great project, right? Good connections, brilliant founders, successful entrepreneurs. But just because they're on Polkadot, the project is valued at a very low valuation, which from, you know, the perspective of a VC fund is exactly what you want, right? As a VC fund, you don't want to pay whatever $100 million for like a guy with an idea and a pitch book and some flashy graphics and so on. But Polkadot has very low valuations. Like the projects, very low valuations, very, very low. That's the time you want to invest and then ride the wave up. But it's a good place to be right now.
Cool. I'm sure you could name more things you loved about Polkadot, but I think we need to wrap it up now. So it was amazing, Max. Seriously, great chat. I got to know you better and what you did before and your plans and your views. And I'm sure the community is going to have a chance through this video too. So thanks so much for joining, and really grateful. And good luck with your DV application and your business as well. We'll be in the ecosystem, and we'll be in touch, right?
Amazing. Good talking to you, man. And yeah, speak soon. I'm not going anywhere.